Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Cut Pro Wrestling Podcast. I'm your host, Randy Zellea from BackSportsPage.com. With me, as always, my tag team partner, Emerito Rivera from Level 1 Games, looking to turn heel at any moment. And Em, great show this week.
Very great, man. Listen, I had one of my buddies, the Colossal Mike Law, on with us, and he had a moment recently where he does a suicide dive out of the ring through a chair. So he's gotten a lot of notoriety and a lot of attention from that recently. But that is not the primary reason we had him. I wanted to get another side of wrestling. I wanted the indie side. And who best to go to than one of my old buddies from when I used to wrestle back in, 98, 99. And we went to the same gym. And I stopped, he kept going. So we're getting a perspective that normally we don't get.
It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed the interview. But before we get to the interview, let's let everybody know where they can find us on social media. We are on Twitter at The Cut Wrestling BSP, as well as on Instagram and Facebook at...
Listen, I'm going to be honest with you. I suck at this, so I actually wrote it down. All right? You can find us at The Cut PW Podcast on Instagram and The Cut Pro Wrestling Podcast on Facebook. That's what happens when you prepare.
And of course, right now, as we're working out the kinks for our YouTube channel, you can find all of our shows at the Back Sports Page YouTube channel right now. Subscribe now. Also, home base for us is backsportspage.com. So right now, you've heard of us jabber on for a few minutes. Now let's check out our interview with Mike Law. Welcome to another edition of the Cut Pro Wrestling Podcast. My name is Randy Zellea, along with my tag team partner, Emerito Rivera. And, well, we have a special guest today. Em knows this man very well, and I'm going to talk to him a little bit, get to know him as well. Michael Law. Mike, thanks for joining us this morning. Appreciate it, brother.
It's the Colossal Mike
I'm sorry.
Law. All right. I've known this guy since we were kids. He's a real cool dude, and I've actually really wanted to have him on the show. And you remember I've pitched him before. I think this is the perfect opportunity to get to know him. He's gone viral recently for going through a goddamn chair. So I figured why not have him on now rather than wait? So welcome to the show, Mike.
I don't know if you're allowed to use GD, by the way, but we'll find that out through post-production, but that's okay. Mike, sorry about that.
No worries, man. Thanks for having me. I know Em has tried to push me on the show, and I appreciate that. It literally took me dying for that to happen. But, hey, better late than never, right?
Actually, this was the pitch. Check this guy out. He almost died. He went through a chair. We got to get him on the show while he's still alive. Okay, awesome. Let's get him on then. Let's quickly get him here as quickly as possible.
You know what? What's funny is I've actually wanted you on the show, no joking aside, because I want to get more of the indie side of wrestling. We've done guys like DDP. We've done guys, the Good Brothers, Rocky Romero. We wanted to see the other side. I want to push because the people that watch this, everyone is so enamored with the big guys, the big companies. I want to show them that one, there's another side to wrestling, and one that's just as important as the big stuff. This is the feeder system to all the really cool stuff that we see on TV now, is the indies. And the perfect person in my mind to represent that was you, who you've been in the indies since what, 2000?
2001 was my first legitimate pro indie show in Jersey for NWA Over the Top. So, off and on, I could go on all day about the different times where I took time off, but since the early 2000s. But yeah, I feel like that's a thing. Where do you think the guys like CM Punk came from, or Seth Rollins, or Daniel Bryan? These guys came from the feeder system known as the independents, and I think for a while that was forgotten, Gallows, all these guys at one point may either appeared on an indie or went back to it, just to, hustle. And that's what it is, man. The independents are that hustle before you get to those, big leagues. And, I've been happy, or fortunate enough that I've been able to do my thing as long as I have in the independents, and, still continue to, make some waves. So I'm happy about that.
That's great to hear.
In your time so far, in your time so far on the indie circuit, from when you started till now, obviously not COVID era, but can you talk about how the indies have sort of changed a little bit?
Yeah. So as far as the indies, man, like back in the early 2000s, like it was very edgy. I would say that it was stuff that you would never see on national TV. Obviously you saw with the progression of the Attitude Era, more shock value stuff, but even in the independents, there were more, it was definitely more of an underground feel to it. There wasn't the lighting, there wasn't the fanfare that it had at the time. We certainly didn't have social media to depend on to get the word out about things. So it was a lot more inclusive in the sense that, there was a certain level of fans that watched the independents. Now I think it's a double-edged sword, because you also have the social media, which does give access to a lot more eyes on the independents that you never saw before. But at the same time, it's opened it's opened eyes on certain things that, probably aren't the most, the best quality either. So sometimes people don't know the difference. They don't know how to differentiate, 1, 2, 3 promotions from ABC wrestling, I think sometimes people just glom it all together, as opposed to saying, okay, well, this is good quality wrestling. And then this is probably stuff that could use some help. You know what I mean? And it just varies like anything else. It's just going to vary. But it was a lot more of a grungy feel, man, back then. It was a little edgy. It was a little bit more underground, as far as back in the day, there's certainly a lot more, I think now athletically, there's so much more talented guys and girls. Back then it was, it was just much more, you had a lot more bigger guys too. Like Em could tell you, like when we started training back in '98, I mean, I was 110 pounds, dude. Like I was getting this tossed around, punch kicked, these guys didn't want me around. They didn't want guys like me and Emerito around, because we were smaller guys. And, they knew that with that tide going, that, it was eventually going to be open to smaller talented individuals,
And also to follow with that too, especially with social media and the different platforms, having platforms like YouTube and Twitch where people can broadcast live on that. Do you think that helps the indie promotions? Because like you said, sometimes there's good wrestling action and then there's what we like to call the shits. You know what I mean? Like, is it a positive thing to have those streaming platforms?
I think so, because especially now, I mean, we can't ignore the fact that we're living in an era of a pandemic, and that if these promotions are to survive, they're a small business, man. Like people don't realize, like logistically running a wrestling, and I've been a promoter and I've ran events before, multiple events, and I know how hard it is. And I know the overhead that it takes to put together a show or an event. It's not easy. And so if there's a way to monetize it and support the businesses, support the independents, I'm all for that. I'm totally good for that. I think it needs to be something that needs to be discussed. As far as quality, man, people's tastes are going to vary. So people are going to think, okay, maybe something that I personally don't like and think is not up to par. Some people are like, oh, this is the greatest shit ever. And that's cool, man. That's all different tastes. I'm just saying, when people generalize, and I think this goes to a lot of the fans who strictly watch WWE, for example, like I don't see that coming a lot from the AEW fans. A lot of those fans followed like the Young Bucks and Orange Cassidy and those guys like through the independents. So they know, they have an idea how the independents are. But like, I feel like a lot of the WWE fans, and this is no fault of their own, this is what they've been programmed to watch, like they just generalize, oh, well, independent wrestling, it's all outlaw shit, and I mean, I couldn't be farther from the truth, man. There's some really good to great quality independents that before the pandemic were doing good business.
Yeah, that brings me to guys like what was it? Pro Wrestling Guerrilla. They're amazing stuff out there, man. There's so many independents that are just incredible. I think I just read that book by Keith Elliott Greenberg about the indies. And he wrote about all the indies across America and some outside of the United States. And it brought to light all of these great places that we don't even know about, because here we are, we're sitting there, we're watching WWE, and this is one of the reasons that I wanted to broaden people's horizons, basically, and expose them to another side of wrestling, I would say. And even now, it's like with me and Randy, we became friends at the store, and we would watch WWE all the time, right? We'd sit there and we'd watch WWE, and then AEW came along, and I tried to get him into that, and slowly but surely, I've been exposing him to Ring of Honor and New Japan. He's very hard headed and not watching that with me, but it's like I try to tell people all the time, because I had one argument with a childhood friend of mine. He was very upset that I was critical on a storyline in WWE at the time. I don't even remember what it was. It was very forgettable, and he was
which
upset.
most of their program is, by the way. Most of their programming.
I mean, at this point in time, it is, but
yes.
I'm not going to sit here and crap on it, because that's like Greenberg said, we drank the Kool-Aid, and that's one of the reasons we like pro wrestling, is we grew up watching that stuff. So I don't want to down it too much, but I downed whatever was going on. It was silly. It was forgettable. The what they were saying was just, it didn't sit right with the character. And the guy comes back at me and he's like, well, where else are they going to work? And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, these guys work everywhere. And he just kept telling me, it's like, well, if they're not in WWE, then they're not working. And I'm like, dude, like, you could go to Ring of Honor, Impact, New Japan, and then a number of other independents out there. It's like a lot of people think that if you're not in WWE, then you're not working. So I wanted to sit there and show people, like, look, there's work out there, things are kind of hard. And I want to segue into that. Like the indies were growing, and I think they were at the height of their popularity last year. How is it this year for you, like in the independents, to try to work and just like even having that anxiety of having that virus around you? Like, how do you deal with that?
It's been hard.
I'm sure.
And listen, there's things about the independents that I feel the need a production guy. I'm a big fan of like proper lighting, effects, all that jazz. When I used to help run FWE, got to give them a shout out. We were very big on production and making sure that the lighting and all that stuff, like we wanted to make it an event. One of the coolest things that happened when I was there was we did a show at the Umpcore Center in Corona, Queens. It was a pretty big venue. I think the main event was Rob Van Dam versus Tommy Dreamer. And the coolest thing was shutting off the house. We were starting the show at 8:00, shutting off the house lights and getting a huge reaction from the fans, because they were so excited that, like the event was starting, and it was like they got the FWE chant going, and it was pretty cool. And I feel like that's something that a lot of independents need to focus on. I get that, they're on shoestring budgets, many of them, but I always, to me, even if I'm not on a specific show or event, if I see that the production is really good, I'm like, you know what, man, good for those guys. They're standing out. They're trying to make this, not only, you got to make an experience, not just an event. Like I always tell people, like when you come to any show that I used to promote, you're not coming to a wrestling event. You're going toward, you're putting your money down on an experience. And that's what I always feel that WWE has done amazingly. And that's why they have such a huge market share, is that they're not just creating shows, man. They're creating experiences for people to talk about. And that's in moments. That's a huge thing in wrestling, moments. Going back to the independents, it's been tough. I think for me personally, yes, has money gotten better for me? Yeah, because I killed not that I kill myself. I mean, I'm here, I'm working out, I'm doing what I got to do, but I've paid my dues and I've done what I have to do to be allowed to say, hey, this is what I want, and we can agree on that or disagree. But merchandise not going through, that shit sucks, man. Like that's so tough, because you can go to an event and clear a couple $100 at an event that has fans. But if you're doing a taping it's hard. People, you're not selling anything to anybody, so that's a part of the income that gets kind of just taken off the top. Of course, everyone's going to be anxious, man. Like, what we do is contact, so full contact, and so a lot of times, I'm a big believer in testing, so I test before and after the events. That's what I've done. I know a lot of companies mandate it now and have been mandating it. I'm all for that, man, because it's not so much about me; it's about everyone else, And I think that's just been a thing with independents. They've grown. It's again a double-edged sword, because where there are quality independents and promoters, there are the other half, which is like, people who probably shouldn't be investing their money into wrestling, because, everyone thinks they can do it. And then when it comes time to actually be a promoter and promote and put together like events, it's not easy, man. It's not. It's a lot of logistics. It's like getting in contact with talent, budgeting, marketing, promoting, all that stuff that nobody wants to look at from the outside. But when they get in, it's too late.
It's funny because I thought about promoting, excuse me, when I was younger. And then I looked at it really, like I looked at all the logistics. I was like, yeah, screw that. Like I'm not getting into that. That's a wormhole. I decided not to go into.
It's a lot of risk, man.
Definitely.
Especially in New York.
Oh, yeah.
And it's funny, you stole my thunder, because I was going to ask about the difficulty of promoting, but I want to take another side of that as well. As a wrestler, indie wrestler, what do you look at as far as booking yourself a show? What do you look for when you're looking for the opportunity to go work somewhere? Is there any time you looked at a situation and said, you know what, that's probably not going to be the best opportunity for me? And where also the other side where you say, you know what, that's an amazing opportunity. Can you talk about the selection that you make as far as where you're going to work?
No, right. Great question, man. I would say this, like, there have been times where I've taken more money for a company probably wasn't the best, you know what I mean? But I stopped doing that because, if you start doing that for too long, it kind of just bastardizes your own brand. So I don't want to be at a point in my life where I'm working for a company where it's like, okay, like this dude is in like serious need of money. Like, listen, I plan my financial future well, so I'm happy, you know what I mean? Like, but like we're independent, so we have to kind of do all our we have to do our digging, we have to do our work. And a lot of that times when I see a roster, if a promoter hits me up and I see, certain guys and girls, and I go, okay, well, I'm the only one here who has any gear, or, like I look like I invest in myself, that's going to be a portion of it, it all depends. You can quantify like saying, okay, well, this company's probably not going to pay me as much, but they have great exposure and that will translate to money later. You know what I mean? Like that's one of the things you can take away from it. But then you also have situations where, okay, it's not a reputable company. You see the talent roster is probably not going to be something that's going to help you, meaning you're not going to be put in there with someone who's going to be either at your level or better to help you raise your game up as a wrestler or as a performer. And then at that point, you're like, okay, well, there's really no reason for me to do this unless, I can budget to them an amount that makes sense for them and makes sense for me to come out and wrestle for them, And those are the things you do. Like you quantify based on the value. So it could be exposure, it could be money, it could be, other talents in that locker room that are going to help propel you in terms of their skill level and your skill level, But if there's not much of that going on and you're just going in there to kind of lend your brand to their name, you probably should ask for more money. That's just my typical mental thinking, overall.
It's awesome because you brought up something I wanted to touch base on, and that's your brand. And you've come a long way from the dude I knew back in Brooklyn, right? Like I used to watch you and you were like one of the best in there, man, flying around. But now you come out with this huge, gigantic barbell, and
which we discussed last night, by the way. We were talking about that.
Of course. Like I followed you on Facebook just because I'm not in constant constant contact doesn't mean that I'm not paying attention. Now I'm watching you do these shoots with the barbells in Times Square, and you're walking around, and you even lost it, didn't you? You lost it in DR.
Okay, so I was going to Dominican Republic, and the customs said, "Hey, there's no way," because okay, I mean, this is like an inside thing, but it breaks apart.
Okay.
I mean, that thing is huge. It's
huge.
And I literally have that mental picture of going through airport security with this giant barbell.
Barbell.
I would like to check this in, please. Boom.
Well, yes. I wouldn't have let me go through anyway. So I had it like compacted, and the plates are like 2 feet wide. Like it's huge. It's intentionally ridiculously big for that reason. And they're like, yeah, you're not going to be able to take that with you on the plane, and there was no. It wasn't going to fit anywhere. And I already had my luggage already paid for to go under the, in the compartment area. So they weren't going to let that slide. And so I just left, I left there and then they just, they held off, and then I had to pick it up, when I came back from DR.
Okay. So
but I mean,
you didn't lose it.
Didn't lose it. She just was hanging out in pretty much. She couldn't take the trip. Sorry, this is the way it works sometimes.
I literally had the mental picture of like the lost luggage section. There's a big barbell.
Sure, that was a missed opportunity. I should have taken it, because when I came back, she was in pieces, but like having it put together and then like in front of all the luggage would have been a cool little thing.
I remember seeing you in DR. I'm like, where's the barbell? And then later on, you mentioned it, like, oh yeah, she couldn't make the trip.
And in a way, I'll say this: I love wrestling in Dominican Republic. It's such a I wish they do. I was supposed to do a tour down there. Actually earlier this year. But the thing is, obviously because of COVID. But I will say this: the fans out there, if you want to take a DeLorean back in time to what wrestling fans used to be in the 80s and in the 90s, maybe in the early 90s, that fan base are such rabid fans, man. And they still believe, and it's such a cool thing to take that kind of that time warp and go, hey, this is what it used to feel like, back in the 80s when fans, when you people were throwing stuff at you, and they had cops with shotguns there. Mind you, it was one of the most there's 5 very dangerous places in DR. This was one of them. and I just remember thinking, God, I don't think I was in the position of the regular heels that were out there, but I was certainly in a situation where, they call me gringo, even though I'm Puerto Rican, but whatever. But they were like, I felt like they were like, okay, this dude's not from around here. He's definitely and then they had me represent the United States, which was even worse because, we were going through political issues with certain people, and that didn't help my situation. But I think at the end of the day, they're like, all right, well, we don't like him, but we have to respect him because, he went in there and did his thing. And, he's a bad guy, but he's charming.
I also wanted to ask too, because I brought up your branding before, and we were also discussing the indies. And because you said something before about merchandise, which is a key thing. And I went onto your store. I was able to see the merch that you have. I think you're the second to Colt Cabana that I saw that has as much merch for indie. How important is that to be able to? Social media is such a big thing that we were talking about before. Sort of plug your stuff, as well as sort of do that DIY of shilling your merchandise a little bit to making sure you have that second income as a wrestler, not just for performing at the shows, but also having that extra couple $100, like you said, for merchandise coming in on a nightly basis.
I'll say this: the guys that I picked that up from when I used to do when I used to run stuff was the Young Bucks and Colt Cabana. Those guys, man, when they would wrestle for FWE and we had them set up in merch tables, those guys had so many different shirts and stuff like that. And to me, I was like, those guys would, the Bucks themselves would walk out with a couple $100s, no lie, in Colt Cabana. So I said to myself, okay, well, I knew I was in wrestling at the time, but I said to myself, like, this is a huge part now than it's ever been. Like back when I started in the early 2000s, I didn't have merch. I didn't even have 8x10s. So that was like, but those were the 8x10s and the glossies. Those were the thing back then, and everyone did them at some point. But going now into the last few years, it's so important, man, because it is DIY. You're doing it yourself. And I always tell people I'm like the Walmart of I want to be the Walmart of independent, meaning I can give you a little bit of everything. And this year obviously was tough. I had the only thing that I was able to get this year as far as new product was fanny packs, and my logo, my likeness on there, and those are cool. But like I had so many different ideas of stuff that I was looking to work on, and it didn't happen, and it wasn't worth it for me to
invest this time,
out a bunch of merch because I was going to buy at this point. But I will say, man, there are times where it saved me. There are times where I've gone to a show and the draw wasn't good, and it happens, man. It happens at every company, independent or not. And the merch has saved my ass. Like, you know what I mean? Where it's like, oh God, I didn't lose my ass here. I didn't make millions, but I didn't lose my ass completely. So it is a safety net, man. And I urge, like at the end of the day, man, you're selling like we're all Walmart, like this podcast, it's its own product. It's its own brand. Colossal Mike Law is his own brand. It's like it's not where it's like you're just in the wrestling business. We're in the business of ourselves. We're all small businesses. So I always look at it that way, and, my younger brother, who's a referee, Ref Steven, quick shout out. He was very adamant about me pushing shirts. He goes, why don't you have merch? Why don't you have t-shirts? Why don't you have anything? And I went and I said, you know what? He's absolutely right. I took money that I would make from shows. I put them away in a little envelope, and I would use that money to invest or reinvest in my own brand. And it's so important, dude. I can't even, very important.
And before we get off, we'll talk a little bit about how your brand came about. Because like I said, the dude I remember, we were kids, you were DDTing me. I remember that like it was yesterday. But I want to know after that, after you got on the indies and you came up with Colossal Mike Law.
So I was Sabotage for many years.
Yeah, you were.
I use different versions of that name, and it's all on cagematch.com. Like, dude, they know everything. It's scary how much Cage Match knows. They know more stuff about me than I know of myself. But dude, that was like, I didn't even know that match happened, or I don't remember that match, but they're great. So once I stopped wrestling, in-ring wrestling, 2011 to 2015. I was strictly just trying to promote at that point for FWE. And I helped a couple other companies, per diem. Like, it was a cool side business. And I was a vendor too. So I was making my money that way. I was I wasn't an in-ring competitor. FW went out of business in 2015, unfortunately. And then at that point, I still had that void that I had to fill, man. And I always knew that I could still give back. I just, I never really had my feet 100% in wrestling, in the sense that I didn't forgo everything to be a wrestler. That's my fault. And that's probably why the opportunities that should have come my way didn't happen, and that I have to take accountability for that. Like, not moving to OVW when one of my friends asked me to, that was a huge faux pas on my end, because I could have learned so much, not even just learning from Rip Rogers and those guys. But at the same time, going back in the indies, I was just Mike Law. I didn't, I was trying these different monikers and names, but then ultimately, I always had a Napoleon complex, that's, I make no, secret about it. I walk around, people are like, oh, well, he walks around like he's the man. Well, it's not that. It's good posture. But also, I always believed I was 6'7". I always had a mentality in my head that I was this big dude. You know what I mean? I walked around more with pride, but with confidence, and I think it came about where it's like, what's a word that I could use that can illustrate not just the idea that I think I'm this ginormous, larger than life character or person, but like something that can flow off Mike Law. Because I hate the name Mike Law, but I was using it for such time that I was like, whatever, let's just go with that. So I was like, we thought about like X-Men for whatever. So we thought Colossus, okay. And then I just said, okay, well, we'll just do, what about Colossal? And so we just started going Colossal Mike Law because it just flowed very well. And then on top of that, like, you know, it just kind of engulfed everything I thought I was or who I think I am mentally.
Well, before again, I'm going to stick on this subject, but slightly pivot a little bit. So again, I'd like to stay on the theme of in the indies. One of the things that we see on WWE and AEW are these big, great characters larger than life. But on the indies, obviously, it's a different scene. It's a different feel. What do you think, in your opinion, is more important, the character or the work rate in the indies?
I think there has been a shift in the paradigm in the sense that for the longest time it was about the character. Here's the thing. I remember going to this dude's wedding party, like it was just an engagement party. And I used to come out before I was Colossal Mike Law. I was the masculine Marvel Sabotage. I did this for an independent in like a few independents, but I would come out with this big protein jug, which was the precursor to the barbell. It was a big protein jug that I would put like gimmicks in there. Like I would put like brass nuts in there and powder, stuff that I would use to win matches. So this guy out of nowhere comes up to me, he goes, "You're the guy with the jug, the big jug, right?" And I had been removed from that whole thing for like years. But that just goes to show you, bro, like people remember that stuff. You know what I mean? Like work rate is amazing. Like I think you have to I think at this point in the game, you have to be a little bit of everything to stand out, especially in the indies, because there's so many independent wrestlers. People don't realize hundreds, you know? And so I think when you use a combination of the work rate along with a character that people can kind of like, you know, bite into, that's a good recipe to win, you know? And I don't necessarily think one's more important than the other. I do believe that people remember moments and they remember how you made them feel as opposed to like, yo, I could do a 630, which is cool. I mean, I wish I could, but I think long-term people remember the memories in terms of how you made them feel more than the actual moves that, you know, that you portrayed, really. Just my opinion.
Listen, it's a great opinion. I respect it a lot.
And one of the things that
remember the Hulk Hogan's, people remember, you know, the Rowdy Pipers, you know, and, you know, I think again today, because of MMA kind of helped propel the idea that because MMA is as real gets, you know, I know UFC used that tagline forever, but like, I think that helped propel people to be like, okay, like we in this industry have to pick up our act because now we have to be able to compete, not necessarily with the legitimacy of MMA, but the athleticism and the ability to portray what we do in a high level situation, if that makes sense.
And also too, something that you just said as well, that I always take away with it is like, cause I'm a sports writer too. And I cover minor league sports and the major league sports. It's always cool when you see athletes start from the bottom and you see them propel to that next level. And I always took that with indie wrestling as well. You're able to see some of these guys when they first start, and then you're like, oh my God, look, there they are on TV. So it's pretty cool when you get to see that transition and able to see the growth. And something that I got to ask also about being on the indies. I'm going to quote CM Punk here. CM Punk made a comparison to AHL hockey players and NHL hockey players. For the AHL hockey players to get better, they have to play with people that are better than them so they can go up to that level. Can you name some of the veterans that you've got to work with over time to help raise your game to the next level? guys who've had that experience that you've been able to learn from?
Absolutely, man. And I completely agree with Punk on that. You know what I mean? Like, that's something that, like, you know, now, like, I feel sometimes it's a struggle for me because I've been around long enough where it's like, okay, like, now a lot of the companies want to bring me in and they're like, okay, can you help this guy get better and stuff like that? And I get it. Like, that, I'm a journeyman. You know what I mean? Like, I will say, I have, just to go back on what you said about, like, the independence and the exposure, AEW has been doing a really good job of, like, allowing a lot of independent wrestlers to kind of get in there, showcase what they can do, and, you know, potentially get a contract. I will say, in the same light, that NXT and, you know, and WWE to a smaller extent, I guess, has been able to do that as well. And you got to applaud that, because ultimately the independence has always been, it's, you know, it goes back to the territory days. That's always been a feeder system for the bigger organization, whether it was an NWA or AWA or WWF. That's what I feel can be beneficial by going back to some sort of system like that. Going back to what you said as far as people, man, like, there's too many to name, you know what I mean? Like, there's Jimmy Rave, you know, bless him, you know, I know he's had some difficulty recently. You know, Jimmy Rave was a great guy that I learned from. Homicide, you know, total independent and, you know, just a legend, the guy that helped the New York scene more than anyone ever know. You know, Chase Owens from the Bullet Club, having wrestled him, you know, one time in Super A was a showcase to me that I could hang, but also I think helped me mentally be like, okay, like, I can totally go against anyone, because he's such an impressive, you know, opponent. There's been so many. I feel like it'd be terrible to leave anyone out, you know. Steve Mack was another guy, you know, from the Hit Squad. You know, Adam Rose. Listen, earlier on in my career, I wrestled Tito Santana and Brutus Beefcake. Not at the level where I wish I was at the level that I am now from several standpoints, because I think those matches would have been different. But those guys, you know, were learning trees, you know, like, learning from them was pretty cool. Especially Tito, you know, he was very critical, I think, of me because of my size at the time. You know, I wasn't even like, I wasn't like lifting or anything the way I should have been, you know. So I was 100 and probably 30 pounds. So you probably thought, like, God, like, what am I getting myself into? But, you know, he was very cool, and he kind of, like, helped me out with that. Man, I don't know. It's just, I feel like, you know, there's so many people that have helped me come along the way, you know. But I will say this, even guys that aren't known names on TV, I try to learn from everybody, man. Like, I always try to feel like, okay, even if there've been guys that have been around less time than I have, that oh, okay, that's cool. I can definitely, you know, dig that. I'll say this, a guy that I trained with once or a few times, Jay Lethal. That dude is the truth, man. Like, that guy, him and Azrael doesn't get enough credit, man. That dude, Azrael, he's a great friend of mine. He does not get enough credit for being as good as he is, man. He is such a great overall around wrestler. Ricky Reyes, I'm dropping names like right. I don't want to include it, you know, I don't want to exclude everybody, but, you know, that's pretty much a good list of people that I learned from, you know, or at least, you know, bits and pieces that, like, you know, like the Lethals, you know, Ricky Reyes, you know, guys like that I was like, okay, those guys. Mike Mondo, even though I never got in the ring with Mike Mondo, I'd watch Mike Mondo, and from the Spirit Squad, but that guy was so, like, fundamentally sound, dude. Like, no one can mess with that guy.
And just a quick follow-up with that too, I have to ask about the recommendation that you would make to staying in the United States and is to also having opportunities to go to Puerto Rico, go to Japan, go to those types of places, not only for the different styles, but also for building a brand and name value because of the reputation wrestling does have overseas. What do you usually recommend, not only for yourself, but for other indie wrestlers who are trying to build their name and their brand?
Yeah, I mean, I think like anything else, it's an investment. You know what I mean? Like, it's like when I was asked, when my friend, Spiral, God rest his soul, about going to OVW, it was a move, man. It's literally like, hey, man, you got to pack your shit and make that move. And he tried, and I was just very, very naive and very, I had a lot of confidence issues for many years. But I will say, like, if you're looking to wrestle in England or Japan or any of those places, and you don't have that brand recognition and you're not going to be flown out, yeah, you may have to take that risk. You may have to make that investment to get yourself to that place. But ultimately, like, if it helps and it works and it happens to find a new home, you might make a bigger impact that way. I think, I talked to a lot of the, like, I guess the OGs, and how things were different back in the day where, there weren't as many wrestlers and there weren't many people wrestling trying to get into wrestling as there is now. And back in the day, yeah, you got paid to get flown out to Japan or Puerto Rico or whatever. And it was a different atmosphere, but now, the landscape has changed. We're all technically international superstars. If you think of, not superstars, let me rephrase that. We're all international because if you go on YouTube, if you go on Facebook, that's all that shit's worldwide. This is going to be seen all over or heard all over the world because I've had people buy my fucking wrestling gear from Europe, from Germany. You know what I mean? Like, really? I've never wrestled any of those places. So we got people buying my wrestling gear from different parts of the world and making comments and following me on social media from other parts of the world. So it's that landscape has changed. But if you really want to invest in yourself, you may have to make those moves, man.
So last thing, I don't want to take too much of your time. I know I say this a lot on these things.
Great time with you guys. I haven't talked to M in how many years?
I think since 2012 was the last time we talked. We went to Joel's gym. That's when I saw you. Actually, a little after that, last time I actually talked to you.
Yeah.
But I wanted to touch on something that went viral. We talked a little bit about that. Here we go.
Before we do that, I have to know about M in the ring because I did see a video. We're not going to talk about it, but I bust his chops all the time about it. But I'm not going to bring up that match in particular. But how was M in the ring?
There could have been potential there if he had stuck around with it. Because he was a good base. I think. In all fairness to the guys who like, I considered this I had two trainers. I had Carlos Eagle Morales, who was one of the guys who helped train M too, I guess. And then Lathan. Now, the thing is, we weren't the training situation back in the early 2000s was nowhere near as systematic as it is now. It was so much better. That's the one thing that I will say has improved. Not everyone should be a trainer. Not everyone should be teaching, but I feel there are places now that can teach you way better than back in the early 2000s, man. It was the Wild West. There was potential that he had one thing that no one in my training class had. He had a personality, and that was a huge part of what he could have brought. I think if he stuck to it in terms of being a manager or something along those lines, he probably could have really propelled to, because there's none of that these days. There really isn't. And you need the mouthpiece. He could speak, and that's the one thing that even if you didn't want to do the in-ring stuff, because, maybe it wasn't good for you. I mean, it isn't good for your body. I don't care what you say. Like you could take so many bumps and it's going to eventually affect you. But I think that's something that was a missed opportunity as far as presenting himself. In-ring wise, we could all use improvement. I'm sure he could tell you the same.
He's a natural heel. So
that's what I used to always tell him. Mike, I'm like, nah, I got to be the bad guy. Like,
if he and I did play by play, I would definitely be the Gorilla Monsoon, or I'd be the Jim Ross, and he'd definitely be Bobby Heenan or Lawler.
I think we were watching a match. What was it? It was a battle royal. tag team battle royal, and Proud and Powerful came out, and they stood outside the ring, and Randy's like, they're cheating, and I'm like, no, that's just good strategy, Randy. It's within the rules. They didn't go in the ring, so they could stay out. And we just went on like that for a good half hour while we watched the match.
I'm sitting there saying, like, those are your boys right there, and they're sitting there hiding outside the dude.
Yeah, New York boys, come on, man. Puerto Rican, they're my guys.
If they're from New Jersey, they wouldn't be doing this. They'd be doing things the honest way. Okay?
Yeah, and look what happened. They got thrown out.
Ortiz and Santana playing the strategy, playing the game. I will say, man, I got to give those two guys so much props, man. Like, they worked their ass off, man. And I give them so much respect because they did it the old school way, man. Like, they worked for it and they put the effort in. And that's something that I feel like these days, man, like, as a person who has worked, you know, I've never been handed anything, man. And I will knock on wood, swear to that. I've worked my ass off for everything that I've earned. And I see those two guys and I'm like, man, those guys were brought up right, man. They worked hard. They didn't do the political thing, man. They just put their, face down and they just went at it. And huge props to Ortiz and Santana, man. They deserve everything they get because it's a lost art, man, because everyone wants to take the easy way out. Everyone wants to go online and use bullshit clout that lasts, that shot of dopamine only lasts, that day or two. And then, after that, it's like, okay, what do you do now? Like for me, I know you're going to ask about the dive. Everyone's been asking about it and that's cool. But that I don't rest on that. Listen, the fact that it went viral, hey, that's, the fact that I was able to do that, get back up, finish the match, wrestle the next day in Massachusetts. That's like, I don't, people can say whatever they want. I'm sure there's plenty of opinions, but like, if I didn't know what I was doing, I wouldn't have been able to do it. That's going to be my end game point to that. But I will say this, that I don't rest on that. I don't consider that like people like, oh man, that's great. I'm happy you're okay. And then went viral. Listen, I don't rest on that. You're still going to see promo. You're still going to see vignettes. We got a lot of shit coming up. You're going to still see me wrestle. You're going to still see me do podcasts because I don't rest on just that. I won't rest on just my laurels. I rest on the fact that I'll only be successful when I believe I'm successful. No one else will give me that. No one else will take that away from me.
And that's the thing is, I don't think the most successful people out there never feel they are successful. So they keep striving for it. And that's what brings success. So it's a nice circular mindset. But I have to touch on it because it is something, like I said, it was funny because I saw it. You posted it online and it's amazing that you were able to wrestle the next day after taking that bump. Like I saw it and I was like, is my friend dead? But then I thought about it. And I was like, well, he posted it. So his hands work at least, it was
I know be all there.
Yeah. But it's great that you're all right, man. And I'm happy to hear that you were able to wrestle the next day because it did look ugly, but
okay. So that's the elephant in the room. And listen, like I make no like grandiose claims about it, man. Like what we do requires anytime you step through those curtains, there is a risk involved. And I cannot illustrate that. Like I wrestled Quiet Storm one time. Good old Quiet Storm. I had wrestled Quiet Storm one time and on an arm drag, I popped my shoulder out. Like it just, like, wasn't it? It happened, and that was just one of those freak things, like on an arm drag. We've all taken those. If you trained, you've obviously taken them. If you wrestled, you've taken them. There is a risk. I like to believe myself personally that I've never done something where I've compromised myself or my opponent in a situation where they wouldn't be able to get back up and do this again and again. People can, like, if you don't know me, look it up. Like, I have prided myself. Listen, I lay it in. I'm not going to sit here and say that I think you're going to feel it for sure. But, for a guy who's been doing this for 16 years and, I know a lot of people are like, oh, well, he doesn't look like he's been because of my talent, but, you look young. But the problem is that, and plus the early 2000 indies, were so obscure anyway. Regardless, like I always pride myself on saying, you know what, the person who's my opponent is going to feel it. But I will always make sure that ultimately, despite anything, that they'll be able to get back up the next day and do this again. We all have families, you know. I get the paradigm shift in terms of like how people perceive what we do, but ultimately, like, I take calculated risk. I take calculated risk in my financial planning. I take calculated risk in my merchandise. I take calculated risk when I get in the ring, when I train. It's all, you know, and I took a calculated risk that night against Joey Ace, and he made the right decision. You know what I mean? Like, I'm mad that I didn't win and I didn't get to, you know, I know him and I talk a lot of shit and we still do, but I think ultimately, like, I'm more disappointed in the fact that it's something that I thought was mine wasn't, you know. And I remember John Finnegan, the referee, asked me, he goes, as I'm laying there, he goes, "Hey man, are you all right?" And I go, and this was after the match, you know, Joey had won. And I go, "Yeah, man, I'm okay. I'm okay." And I was pissed, you know, like a lot of things. And he goes, no, "Are you all right?" I go, "Yeah, man, I'm okay." He goes, "You're not all right." I go, "Well, mentally, no, I'm not." Like, who? Okay, we're like, look what we do for the entertainment of fans. Let's just like think about pro wrestling and what we do and what people know about it, and think about like none of us are okay in the head. There are levels to like being okay and not okay, but like, you know, I like to be in the middle there somewhere.
Exactly, and I'm gonna pull the curtain back just a little bit. I don't want to be the guy to just rip it down, but no, I'm not gonna go there. I'm not going to rip it down, but I have to say that the perception of the fans, I remember a ladder match we did, and I went through the sheetrock table, and I went through it like a knife through butter.
What kind of table was that, dude?
Oh my God. I blame Carlos on this one 100%, because we were broke and we didn't have money for a table. So we went to a junkyard and we got a broken little table. And then he's like, you know what would be cool is if we make a table out of sheetrock. And I'm like 17, or I don't even remember exactly how old I was. So I'm like, yeah, sheetrock, perfect. So we go to my house and we take apart this broken little table we got at a junkyard, and then we tape the sheetrock onto the skeleton of the table. And then we take it to the show, and then I go through it. Now I'm thinking it's going to break my fall because, you know, again, I'm a kid. I don't know any better. And it did not. It was just like... And I went straight through it. And the thing is, I'm laying there.
Is that video up? Because you got to post that video.
Maybe one day. Carlos has it. I'm
that
sure.
Might go viral.
I don't need that going viral.
I was doing my best not to embarrass him about this.
No, it's fine. But
like to me, having a ladder match where he has the ladder in the ring, but the belt is hanging on the basketball hoop outside the ring on the side.
Don't get me started on the logistics. Everything was changed at the very last second. I followed the script. I did my part. All right. They said go through the table. I went through the table. Now I'm laying on the floor, and this little fat kid comes and he picks up a piece. Now I'm hurting. I mean, I wasn't hurt, but falling from at least 15 feet through a sheetrock table that didn't break my fall, I hit the floor hard. So I'm laying there and like sheetrock's all in my eyes, and I feel this little fat kid laughing, and he picks up a piece of the sheetrock and he slams it on me. And I'm like, what the fuck? Like, did this little bastard just slam me with a piece of sheetrock? And this is how the fans are sometimes. They don't realize that, look, we know what we're going to do and we know how to do it. But that doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. Like, we hit each other. I don't care who you are. If I'm hitting you, that hurts. So that's the part of the curtain I want to let people into. It's like, yes, they're trained professionals. I can't say I'm a trained professional, but they go out there, they hurt themselves so that you can enjoy it. Don't be dicks. Enjoy it. Appreciate it. Do not laugh when they get actually hurt badly, and appreciate the fact that they are feeling pain for your enjoyment. You know, you're going out there 100% of the time. You will feel pain. You will feel pain during the match. You will feel pain after the match. You will feel pain the next day. So respect these guys. Give them the love that they deserve. They have t-shirts there. Buy the t-shirts. Buy the autograph. Don't be afraid to spend money because this is how they make their living. They have to make this living like that to continue this. So if you enjoy what they do and you enjoy seeing them move up to the bigger companies, go to these smaller shows and spend your money and show. Remember, we vote with our dollars. So vote with your dollars and keep pro wrestling alive, especially during this time of COVID. I know, listen, we got a vaccine right around the corner. We're going to get right back to watching these shows in packed houses eventually. Let's do it. Let's spend some money. Let's make sure that this is a vibrant a business that still continues to thrive for years on end.
No, well said, man. And I'll tell you this, like, when people I got asked at another podcast, they were like, oh, are you like offended or upset when people say negative things about you in terms of like this chair dive? And I go, no, not at all, dude. You got to realize I came up in the early 2000s. You want to talk about fucking brutal fans? Those were brutal. Like you were legit, like hurt. It was a nasty fall. I'm not gonna lie. I thought you popped your shoulder out.
No, it was fine though.
Yeah, I mean, the instant pain from that fall was, obviously, like we can all feel it. But like that's what I'm talking about. Like the fans today could come at me anyway. Not that I pay attention to any of that stuff anyway. But I told them I don't really pay attention to any of the negativity anyway. That's just not me. I just go on with my life. But I said I couldn't be offended because the stuff that was being said and done to wrestlers in the early 2000s, boy, that was a different. I remember I did a show with our good buddy Latin Rage. Remember him? We were the tag champions, and this was in Spanish Harlem in the early 2000s. Okay, now listen, you want to talk about a rabid freaking fan base? Those people were out of their goddamn minds. But I remember we won. We were the heels. Bottles, pennies, all sorts of things at us. So, and even like progressively when I wrestled in Pittsburgh, the stuff that would come out of fans, I was a Spanish kid coming into an area that probably wasn't very populated by Spanish people. And some of the words that were used by fans at that time were brutal. So it doesn't bother me. You know what I mean? Like people are certainly entitled to the opinion. I won't agree with all of them, but I don't feed into any of the negativity, and it certainly doesn't bother me because everyone, you're not going to please everyone. Not everyone's going to be your biggest fan. But I think ultimately, growing up with thick skin based on where I was, years ago, that also helps, the fan base today, no matter what anyone says, will never be as brutal as they were in the early 2000s. The message boards were like a cesspool. You know what I mean? People talk about Twitter. I go, dude, have you guys ever seen the DOI message boards? Those things are fucking crazy. They were making claims that I don't think you could legally claim on anybody. Just all that stuff. So, people could talk about toxicity and all that jazz. And that's fine, but I think, for me, I'm glad that I came up during those years. And I totally agree with you, man. I think part of this, and, Em and Randy, is that these fans do have to support us, not that they have to, but it's an important thing. Without the fans, there is no us. There's no, and
symbiotic.
It's also, yes, good word. But I think the promoters now have to pick up their pace. I'm talking about making sure that they budget their events properly, that they put the money and time in promoting, that they hire legitimate talent, trained talent, that they put money in their product in the sense that production, again, it's all about the experience, not so much. You could put the best talent in the world, but if nobody knows it's happening, it doesn't matter. All right. And I think it has to be a two-way street. I think fans supporting the talent is amazing. Listen, whether I'm a bad guy or a good guy, if you buy my merch, man, I'm so grateful for that. You know what I mean? And it's such a big thing for me to be able to do that. But if you support a company and that's even big, because without the fans, like you said, symbiotic. So it has to work out on all playing field for everyone to be successful.
And I think we're seeing that. I think a lot of the wrestling fans are realizing, hey, listen, if I don't open up my wallet, these guys aren't going to be there tomorrow. And I don't want them going away tomorrow, especially in the world that we're in now. Things are upside down. I see that more often. God knows I've bought like a ton of shirts within the last year, just willy-nilly. It's like, oh, I like that guy.
And it's keeping pro wrestling tees alive right now. That's what
they got a lot of my money. I hate it because sometimes I forget to put in the code and they like charge me full price.
Yeah.
Like,
no joke. Our last order we all did together, and goes, it's 20% off. We got to do this. We got to do this. We got to do this. I'm like, all right. And I go, did you order the shirts? He's like, yeah, but I got bad news. I'm like, I forgot to put the 20% coupon in. I'm like, I'm like, listen, I am totally about helping everybody too, but my wallet is light too sometimes. If I get that 20%, you get that 20%.
Yeah, it was hilarious because I was rushing out of the store. I think we had just watched Dynamite, and I had to go, man. I live in New York and the store's in Jersey, so it's a long ride. I'm like, oh man, I gotta go. Let me get this order in. Bang, and I hit it. And the next morning I woke up, I'm like, I didn't put the code in.
I got some news for you. No, but that's important, man. And I guess, like you said, it works two ways. And like I said, I love seeing the opportunities present itself for, in the bigger companies. No matter what, whether I become a part of any of it, AEW, WWE, NXT, New Japan, all the bigger organizations that are giving the opportunities out, MLW, NWA, like it's always a great thing, and, if it's not for me, listen, I'm going to continue to be here, man. I'm going to work my ass off. I'm going to continue to train. I'm going to continue to improve. People think that after a certain time in the wrestling business that you should, you know everything. I don't know everything. I tell you right now, I don't. But I will say that, you never stop improving. You never stop learning. And that's just for the betterment of the business, not because, for yourself, but you want to leave this thing better than, when you first started.
No, definitely. Listen, I want to thank you personally and on behalf of the podcast. We thank you for your time. This was actually really awesome. We had a great time talking, and I personally had a great time because I haven't talked to you in years. So
it's gonna be another 7 or 8 years.
No, you know what? You know what it is?
Actually, that's when we booked him for another 7 years from now. He'll be back on the show.
I get so wrapped up in life with the store and traveling and doing all this like work. I just don't talk to many people. It's like I barely keep in contact with my friends. But I consider you a friend, and I will do my best to stay in contact. Let's do that. Let's have lunch sometime. But again, thank you so much, guys. If you want to follow this wrestler, again, Colossal Michael Law, look him up.
I'll do it.
Yeah. You can talk to me.
For everybody, folks. Colossal Mike Law. Across the board, you can follow the Barbell. The Barbell has its own Twitter and Instagram. The Barbell on Instagram. You can buy my merch. Listen, it's been very hard because no live events. You can go to storefrontier.com. Just type in Colossal Mike Law, and you'll see all my merch. You have sweaters, you have tanks, you have T-shirts, all of it across the board from the Store Frontier site, or you can go to my Pro Wrestling Tees store, type in Colossal Mike Law, and you can buy my merch there. Boom, done. Let's move on to the next.
Thank you so much. Again, you can follow us at I'm screwing up, at the Cut Pro Wrestling Podcast. See, this is my first time going with the outro, so thank you, Randy, for letting me do that. But thank you.
Ain't easy, is it?
It ain't easy. This is why I leave it up to him. But listen, I got to do it sometimes, especially with my dude here. But thank you again. And guys, I hope you enjoyed this interview. Follow, like, share, and we'll see you next time.
What a great interview with Mike Law. And we welcome your feedback here at the Cut Pro Wrestling Podcast on all of our social media platforms, especially on Twitter at the Cut Wrestling BSP. Where else, Em?
We got it written down again at the Cut PW Podcast on Instagram and the Cut Pro Wrestling Podcast on Facebook. Make sure you like and subscribe to those pages.
Yes, definitely like and subscribe us. Also like to thank our producer, Andrew Fumi, for making us look as good as we do and make us sound as good as we do on all of our media platforms. We're on Spotify. We are on iTunes. We are on Google Podcasts. We are on SoundCloud. You want us, we are everywhere. We thank you guys for taking a little time of your week to listen to us. We try to do the best we can to not only be informative, but entertaining as well. For Emerito Rivera, I'm Randy Zellea. We'll see you next week on the Cut Pro Wrestling Podcast.